one family is all you need to honestly just to develop and grow as a person, as an individual, as a brother, as a son, and I just think support goes a long way.
They're not just looking to rebuild after a great season. They're looking to reload.
Hello, welcome back to Division I Rejects. This is D1R 207. I'm your host, Kobe Manzo. Tonight, we have what I would call probably one of the most informative episodes in Division I Rejects history. I say that because, first of all, we've got the Gulf South, a Division II conference preview. Drew Carpenter and I break down all the teams in the Gulf South Conference, only technically 4 of them right now, but we do a deep dive on all 4 of those teams and what you need to know going into 2025. Jimmy Martin joins the show later. We talk D3 football, the first preseason rankings, top 10 that was released, go through and give you the reasons on a lot of those different teams. And then Matt Schwarzler is back on the podcast later on to talk NAIA football. Him and I both pick a sleeper and a contender for this coming 2025 season and give the reasons of why we think so. But before all of that, we've got a guest joining us tonight, TJ Owensby. He's from Bethany College over in West Virginia. It's a Division III school. We're not talking about what TJ has done on the field tonight, but rather what he's doing off of it. He is hosting a youth camp that a portion of the proceeds are going towards benefiting flood victims inside of that West Virginia kind of local area. So a very noble thing that he is doing. I want to make sure with my platform that we support people like TJ and that have acts of service like that. So excited for that conversation. Otherwise, really excited about the direction of the show right now. Division I Rejects is actually officially an LLC now in the state of Michigan. We legitimized the business operation of this thing. Nothing's really going to change. It just kind of makes it more official and helps me manage the back end of D1 Rejects. What you do need to know is that I pour a lot of time into this thing, and so do the guys on this show. And give them their credit and their flowers too, because there are a lot of people that help out with this. I should say a lot, but there are quite a few people that help out with this and make this happen. In the past, it's been much more of a solo effort. That is changing, and I'm glad to have some help on this side of things to give you the best product possible heading into the fall. The goal is that we get to as many different campuses as possible and do a lot of game day shows. So definitely stay tuned with us. As always, you can watch the episode on YouTube if you are. Howdy. Don't forget timestamps in the description, and also use that red slider to fast forward to any part of the episode. Otherwise, listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Let's get right into the guest episode, or the guest conversation in this entire episode. Joining the show, a fifth-year player at D3 Bethany College in West Virginia. He's a running back for the Bison, but it's not his on-field impact we're talking about tonight. Welcome to the show, TJ Owensby. What's up, brother?
How you doing? Appreciate it. You have me on the show.
Excited to have you on here, man, and we'll get into it a little bit, but what you're doing is a special deal, and I figure, again, if I got a platform, I want to try and highlight what you've got going on. So let's start things off. You're helping host this camp. It comes in less than 2 weeks. Get right into it. How did this idea start? How has the purpose of it changed potentially along the way, man? Tell me about it.
So originally, I just planned to do a flag football camp from ages 8 to 17, to have a different spectrum of scenery when it comes to like the fundamentals. Because my first camp back in March was just, light skill work, it didn't really transition to like anything bigger than that. So I wanted to like add more like fun to it, like a summer twist, type of thing. With recent situations like the West Virginia flood, I just wanted to make adjustments and use my resources to just give back and bring more people together for those who need help getting back on their feet and extra support, which I feel like we all can do as individuals.
Absolutely, man. It's a noble cause, but it's one thing to think that and to say that, and it's another thing to go out and do it, right? And that's what you're doing, I think, which is really special. And, to talk about a little bit of what spurred that change. From what I could tell, some flash flooding in some of those areas, got some really heavy rain that resulted in a lot of property damage and the up moving of people and their families and those kind of things. Thankfully, it sounded like there weren't any maybe injuries or other things involved in that kind of deal. But how did you come to hear about this and potentially the ways that it started to impact the people over there in West Virginia?
Um, I know for sure, like being in the area at the time, I know the area that I was in wasn't as affected as those in those other areas were
Okay.
affected. It's like to me that's just a second home. So it felt almost imperative for me to do anything I possibly could to help and give back.
Yeah. 100%. And this is this camp. It's being hosted at Bison Stadium, where you guys play. What was the process for making that a reality? Obviously, you've got some experience doing camp like this before, but how have your coaches, some of the athletics administration staff, how have they supported you to help make this idea happen, man?
They just, they making sure I have, all the resources I can to, actually make it happen once again. And I really just am imperatively grateful for the support that I have behind me. And without support, you can't move forward. So I feel like that's just a huge thing for the whole process.
Yeah, man. And what do you have planned for the camp? Looking at some of the stuff you've posted out there, looks like combination of, you talked about some fundamental training, some college recruiting, maybe expertise from you, maybe talking to some of that older audience who want to play at the next level, and then, of course, some games and some fun. What does that camp breakdown look like?
So the first one or two sessions will be similar to my last camp, which is, dynamic warm up, and we'll get into skill work. Then we'll break off into everyone will have a chance to go through offense and defensive skill work. That way, when it comes to the games, which will be at the end, each age group will play a 20-minute flag football game, which is completely different spectrum of the last camp. So that'll be like a different sighting for everyone who will participate. And it will go from 8 to 9 to, 16, 17. They would be the last group to play there. That'll be a 20-minute game.
Good. Gotcha, man. And so a portion of those proceeds going towards the West Virginia Foundations for flood disaster relief, getting in touch with that, of course. Does it feel like there's a good turnout potentially coming on? And what is the excitement, anticipation level like from this community?
I think day by day the word is getting out, and I'm even using my own resources to help bring more participants because
Yeah.
Dirty Dog Tavern, which is a local restaurant, is offering 20% off voucher meals for anyone that participates. And the coaches will get free meals on that day for their support and assistance for me.
Awesome, man. Very cool. Any of your teammates making appearances at the camp?
Yes, I'm sure I'll have between 15 and 20 of my current.
That's awesome, man. That's sweet. That's a good little turnout right there. How do you feel, an event like this kind of reflects the values of you and those guys, that program over there in Bethany, where you guys try and live and play by?
This family, honestly, I think it just starts there because one family is all you need to honestly just develop and grow as a person, as an individual, as a brother, as a son, and I just think support goes a long way, a longer way than we think. And another thing is that I think sometimes we fail the opportunity to put good in a society with open opportunities that we have that's on the table at all times.
The buzzword of college football, I think, right? Family. And for a lot of teams, it might just be that. But from everyone that I've talked to that is at least somewhat associated with this program, they have glowing reviews and what comes from, whether it's this group or teams that have come through in the past. And the way you guys operate over there certainly seem to live by that. But to close it out, man, what's the outlook for the on-field performance for this team going into 2025 for you and those guys?
Honestly, to have a really, really, really big season and to be complete as a team can be, and to really just shock ourselves and be the best we can be.
I like it, brother. All I got for you, TJ. Anything else you want to add, man? Where can people sign up? Let's do that. Where can people sign up for the camp?
So I have flyers on all my social medias.
Okay.
And the QR code is right on the flyer. So
We'll
you
plug
can
it.
easily see it, have access to that.
You got it, man. I appreciate your time. Really hoping that the camp goes well and that this is something that makes an impact over there. Again, no matter how many people show up to something like this, you getting the word out and encouraging people is what's important, brother. So I appreciate your efforts in this and hope it goes well, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your night.
You too.
Back tonight with another Division II conference, this time moving from the GLIAC down south to the Gulf South. And this one is an interesting one. This is one that has bred national champions out of this conference. The 4 teams we're talking about tonight are all going to be in contention for it all coming in 2025. Some really high caliber squads. But what you notice, Drew, when we talk about this conference, 4 teams, how the hell does that work? And I think the landscape of this is kind of what we have to address. First of all, the Gulf South right now is down and out. Only 4 football member schools going forward because of the resurrection, so to speak, of Conference Carolinas and other schools inside of the conference being poached to other conferences. So the long-term, I guess, stability of the GSC is very much up in the air. What do we know about the 4 teams that still are in the conference, though?
I think what we know about the 4 teams is it's going to be a dogfight between the 4. Like you said, it's a very good conference, and I think the toughest part is honestly, like, I'm sure these coaches and athletic directors have had an absolute pain to find guys to schedule with because, like, if you think about it, looking at what we know about conference schedules, most of the time you're scheduling teams later in the year, right? And then that mid-level to where it's just like, okay, the first week of October, you got a conference schedule game. For these guys, it's like, hey, if we start in the beginning, then this middle chunk, we got to find people, and that's, I'm sure, really tough.
Yeah, week 0, I think, hopefully opens up a lot of possibilities for them. There are teams opting to take buys kind of in the middle of the season so they could find some out-of-conference scheduling there. But the first team that we have to talk about when it comes to the Gulf South, the Valdosta State Blazers, 13-1. A year ago, they make the trip to the national championship where they lose to Ferris State on the biggest stage. But the biggest storyline for this Blazer team is losing former head coach Tremaine Jackson, who we had on the show. He takes the job at FCS Prairie View A&M. He's replaced by their former offensive coordinator, Coach Graham Craig, who we also just had on the show. So a lot of Blazer lineage coming through here. He helped lead this VSU team to the national championship and was really the backbone of one of the most potent offenses in Division II football. And from Athlink, our source for all this transfer portal data, we know that with instability at the head coaching position or a move comes a lot of people leaving. Sometimes some mass exodus. Valdosta State, for as good as they are, for as high of a pedigree as they are, they were no exception. 50 reported players in the portal at one point or another for this Valdosta State Blazer team. For many, that could decimate the team. We talked about it with the team like Ferris. A mass exodus like that could result in the team taking a dip. I don't think that will be the case for this team. We can talk about a little bit why. A lot of those players follow Coach Jackson to Prairie View, others finding D1 opportunities elsewhere. Rodney Bullard's guy comes to mind right away, wide receiver, going to play for the Spartans at Michigan State this fall. There's so many other ones just kind of top of mind there. Multiple All-Americans, all-conference selections leaving the Blazer sidelines. But on the other side of that, in the side, the transfer portal, they're bringing in 21 recorded transfers, 14 of them from the Division I ranks, many of which come with playing experience at those previous institutions. And one of the most exciting things for the Blazers coming out of this transfer portal class, Drew, is actually not one of the Division I transfers. I want to tell you about a guy who's making the quote-unquote lateral move from one Division II institution to another, that being the linebacker Scooter Baker coming in from Oklahoma Baptist. This is a guy that should be kind of a day one shoe-in impact maker for this Valdosta State team. Scooter, in the 2024 season, his season was cut short due to injury after 3 games. But within that 3 games, one of them was against the number 1 team in the country, Harding. He had 15 tackles in the TFL against the Bison, who we know how hard it is to line up against those guys. 6 foot, 220 pounds, the 2023 All-American honorable mention, All-Region linebacker. He was a first-team All-GAC selection, and that is going to be a day one impact difference maker for this Valdosta State team that is losing depth at the linebacker position, so Scooter's a guy you need to have your eye on going into this season. Another guy, though, you talk about supplementing that linebacker core on the defensive side of the ball. This guy coming in from a Division I background is a guy that I think Coach Graham and or Coach Craig and company, are very excited about. Talking about the guy from Delaware State, that being Aaron Willis, previously with Houston, with Tennessee. This is a journeyman type pickup for the Blazers and a guy that is, again, you would imagine going to be a day one impact type of guy. Now, another good note with this squad, quite a few transfers coming from former D2 Limestone. Unfortunately, they had to shut down their program after this season, so it's good to see them kind of get a step back into things. So, moving forward, 2025 season questions for the Blazers and Coach Craig. Can they continue the dominance at home? They've won 14 of the last 16, including the last 8 consecutive games at their home field down there in Titletown, Georgia. Sammy Edwards is gone, though. The 2-time Harlan Hill finalist was a big reason for their success. The only other quarterback to see snaps in game for this team was Seth Smith. He'll be a junior this fall, 6'2", just under 200 pounds. Definitely will be a guy as a part of the competition, but where it gets interesting is the quarterback they're bringing in. Harris Boyd joins the Blazers from Memphis. And Drew, that's important because, yeah, of course, any quarterback from Memphis you would imagine is going to be a guy that knows how to sling the rock. But what's interesting about this pickup is that's actually where Coach Craig spent the 2023 season as a senior offensive analyst and quarterbacks coach. So Boyd comes to Valdosta State with 3 years of eligibility left. He didn't see any time in game with the Tigers, but once again, you'll imagine that he's definitely going to be a part of that QB competition with the Blazers. Again, 2025 schedule, they got the Week 0 Labor Day Classic we've talked about with Clark Atlanta at Legion Field. That's their first neutral site game in 7 years, which will be interesting. And you go through some really tough non-conference matchups. Talked about the scheduling a little bit earlier on. They have found a way to put together a quality schedule for 2025. Johnson C. Smith, a team from the CIAA who was 8-2 just a year ago. You bring in a national powerhouse like Lenore Ryan, 10-3 last year with a playoff win. And finally, you're at the Citadel, a D1 in South Carolina, That's their first D1 opponent that they've played against since 2003. All of that to say, a very, very daunting schedule for a Valdosta State team that is going to have to reload and try and figure out their offensive identity, especially in the first couple games of the season, Drew.
Yeah, I think obviously when you hear the amount of portal guys and guys you've lost in general, because then you got to add in graduation and everything to that extent as well, it's very alarming, right? But then when you look at just the guys that you anticipate the Blazers bringing in, you're like, okay, this is one of those situations that we had talked about with Ferris State and we talked about with like a Davenport, teams that are successful, right? They're not just looking to rebuild after a great season. They're looking to reload, right? And we had talked about what is the portal, one of the blessings of the portal is getting guys that not only are you, like, for instance, the quarterback familiar with, but you're also getting guys that are able to contribute right away versus guys who might not understand the defensive and offensive packages that they might have to get into compared to a high school. So I think that's where the Blazers are going to look to reload. And I think one of those things is they look at those first couple of games, right? Starting off with an opponent who was 8-2 last year. How do we get this momentum going, right? That's a huge confidence win right there if you get that. And you talked about playing the Citadel. If you walk into the Citadel and win that game, talk about, hey, that's exactly how to get the guys motivated, exactly how to set the culture and set the tone from day one.
Yeah, tone setter for sure. Let's talk about one of the first roadblocks when it comes to Gulf South play in the Statesman.
All right, yeah, so starting off with Delta State, the Statesman, solid 2024 campaign, 6-4, but obviously, Delta State has really high expectations with itself, especially after just success within the program. And they got a 2025 team that's looking for something to prove. But I will say, we talked about scheduling with Valdosta. Yeah, Delta State has something as well to do with that scheduling because they have 3 opponents that all finished over 500 to start the year. Central Missouri, as we know, the Mules, that's a tough program right there. North Greenville, as well as UNC Pembroke. So they'll be tested very early. And then, obviously, let's go to the departures. We're looking at a couple of guys that – entered the portal, whether it be wide receiver Jalen May, JJ Hudson, a linebacker. And then this is where I want to focus to Amarian Foster and Tamaj Hoffman, 2 guys that also entered the portal. And then as far as graduation, Kelvin Smith, a running back, to go with Tamaj Hoffman, who's also a running back, and Amir Taylor, their leading tackler. So you look at a couple of guys, Cope, that they're losing guys that not only could have came back, but they're also losing some seniors too that highly contributed. And that's going to go into the couple of questions, but they are bringing in some key guys too. So Jamison Kelly, a defensive back from Indiana. And when you hear Indiana at the Division II level, you're thinking, oh, wow, Power 4. That's a big time get. So expect Jamison Kelly to come in and contribute right away, as well as Matt Rozier from Chattanooga, also a Division I team. So they're getting guys that they expect to come in and contribute immediately.
Yeah.
The questions I have for Delta State, we always talk about, at least me, when you're looking to build a program, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they always talk about how it's tough to necessarily like create an offense center around a quarterback, right? So what do you establish to get the quarterback going? You run game. And with both leading backs gone, Delta State's identity, like who steps up in the running back room? It's a huge position in sports, sometimes forgotten about, but very recently, as we see in the NFL with guys like Barkley, Derrick Henry, McCaffrey, Gibbs, like running back is a huge part of the offense. It could be a completely different difference maker. And so I think that's a huge thing, like who steps up in that. And then can you survive an early schedule? I think that when you and I both know, as far as being on teams that have won, teams that have lost, when you start hot, it's great. You keep the momentum going. When you start cold, it's tough to get the wheels churning. You know what I mean? And not only do they start with 3 opponents that we talked about, like Central Missouri, but they end with a brutal schedule, back to back to back. West Florida, West Alabama, Valdosta State.
Yep.
And it's tough to start and finish with really, really tough scheduling.
And you talk about that running back room. I mean, that's a good point. Kelvin Smith, the first team all-conference selection last year for the Statesmen, that could go into determining and changing some of the profile and identity of that offense. From an offensive play caller standpoint, a coordinator standpoint, the way that you dictate and call the game is dependent upon the chess pieces that you have on the board, so to speak, the guys that you have available. And so when you take some of those guys out of the equation, you take those pieces out of the equation, we could see a Delta State team going into this fall that is trying to figure out its identity. Now, the next piece, of course, you're talking about are some mainstays and some pieces that are coming back. Who are the guys that'll determine that identity come August and September?
I think when you lose a guy that's a running back, it's great to have a returning quarterback. Cole Kirk, returning quarterback for for Delta State, very efficient last season. And obviously, when you get a winning record and you now have another year under the system, it's like, okay, how can we build off that? Ty Holsley, defensive back, very good defensive player, led the team in tackles. Expect him to have not only a more significant role, but a better season as well to build off exactly what he did last year. And then Jarius McFarland, another defensive back, led the team in interceptions. And he's another guy to where you expect him to not only contribute the way he did a year ago, but another year, more pressure to being an older guy leading the team. So expect Delta State to have a couple of guys. And then you're looking at Nino LeMay, who with a couple of receivers leaving, he could have a huge year stepping up into that role. And then William Carter. I went over the other linebacker that had just left for Delta State, Amir Taylor. So expect William Carter to now be that signal caller or the guy defensively. We all know when you look at defensive teams, you're looking at, okay, who's that linebacker that's, a leader out there. So expect him to come in and, really contribute.
And I know we're talking about just this last year's team, but I think what we saw too, you talk about identity from an offensive standpoint, no more Patrick Shegog leading this Delta State offense. That was a guy who finished up his career in 2023 and was, one of the best players in the state, right? Regardless of level, he was one of the best players in the state and voted as such by numerous press associations. And when you lost a guy like that was a mainstay of the program, was really the face of that program for a long time, him and the Fighting Okra, of course, shout out to one of the best mascots in college football. You lose a guy like that, a lot of times there is going to be a regression. But the best programs, after a year like that, it happens, they will come back the following. And I think that's what we're going to see from this Delta State squad. But moving forward, a team that I've had the pleasure of covering, I think ad nauseum over the last couple of years, the West Florida Argonauts. This is a team that was 7-3, 2024, and one that has been, ever since its inception, synonymous with the national championship and the national playoff. A team that took less than a decade to claim their first national championship in 2019. A team that has a former quarterback leading the charge now, and Coach Caleb Nobles, that I was grateful enough to have on the show pretty recently. And to start things off by the Argos, again, transfer portal, the loss is there. When you have guys you cultivate to a high level, what happens is they go to the next level. 17 players leaving in this cycle, 2 of them all conference, 5 more starters, 5 DBs leaving in that class, Drew. A big portion of that defensive secondary was decimated for this Argonauts team, but we'll talk about how they address that with their incoming class. For me, the biggest loss for this team, if it's one guy, it's the 6'5", 256-pound defensive lineman, Travion Mitchell. That's a tough loss. He makes the move up to FBS South Florida, stays in state. He was the co-defensive player of the year in the Gulf South last year. 17.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks in 2024 with 46 total tackles. Replacing that kind of production from a defensive lineman standpoint, very difficult. Now, on the incoming class, transfer portal wise. 27 incoming, 5 of them D1 bounce backs. You got 8 DBs, Drew, in this transfer portal class. What do you think as a dude coming in from a DB perspective of like, obviously it's not a quarterback. There's more than one of them in the field at the time. I wasn't born yesterday, but 8 defensive backs coming in one class, the competition level in that camp has to be ridiculous, right?
That's exactly what I was going to get to. You said there's only one quarterback that plays. Well, there's only 4 DBs that usually play, potentially sometimes 5. So if you bring in 8 transfers, iron sharpens iron. And I think that's exactly what West Florida's looking at right there. When it's like, hey, we're going to come in with some guys that, want to play, and may the best man win.
100%. And talking about those DBs a little bit in that incoming class, Roderick Webb from Virginia Union could be a day one starter for this Argonaut team. He's bounced around from team to team. He originally started at Charleston before transferring over to Virginia Union. And what you notice about both of those teams, those are some of the cream of the crop at the Division II level. Charleston, a team that, of course, with a fantastic running back and offense last year behind Siobhan Wright, made an incredible run. Virginia Union went on to have their best year in program history last year under Coach Parker into the playoffs. Those are teams that have experienced success at the D2 level. He comes to West Florida with a good amount of experience under his belt and some great snaps when it comes to game film. Another guy that I want to highlight for this West Florida team when it comes to the defensive secondary, Lumpy DeWeese, coming in from D1 Stetson. Now that's in the Pioneer League, so D1, but of course has that kind of non-scholarship clause, which is, don't even get me started on that. He played in 9 games though last year, had 40 solo tackles, and again, should be a big piece of this new revamped, reinvigorated defensive backfield for the West Florida Argonauts. And you continue going down the list here, 6 offensive linemen coming in. That certainly was an area they felt that they needed to address. Another guy that I want to mention down in the trenches, this time though across the line of scrimmage, the defensive line spot, a big-time addition for the Argos, Jamal Ellis. This is a guy that to me has struggled maybe a little bit to catch on with a team. He started at Samford actually out of high school, went the JUCO route before committing to West Alabama, an in-conference foe. Now though, finishing his college career with the Argos. So these guys have gone out, they've done their homework, they've gotten people from a variety of backgrounds, from a variety of schools and levels, and it doesn't stop there. Another guy on that defensive side of the ball that'll be coming in to make a difference this fall is going to be linebacker Caleb Ross. Now, Ross comes to the Argos from FCS Brown University. He played in 10 games in 2023, but this is where it gets interesting. In 2024, he was sidelined. Now, I don't know if that's because of injury, if that's because of a change at the position or in coaches. This, though, what I do know is this will be a bounce-back year for Ross, who I would expect to have a big-time impact and role with this West Florida team. 2025 schedule. They open with Lenore-Rhine. We talked about Lenore-Rhine a little bit. The Bears are just a top-of-the-line program. Otherwise, non-conference schedule doesn't really jump off the page, if I'm being very honest with you. There are some decent opponents. You go West Virginia State, a team that was 6-5 a year ago. Northeastern State making a comeback in the MIAA. Nobody that really screams national contender. So you'd have to imagine West Florida will fare very well in their out-of-conference and should be certainly in the playoff conversation come conference play. But to close things out on West Florida, some questions for them. Lots of guys that are on their 3rd, 4th, or 5th school that I talked about. Right? The challenge for Coach Nobles and company with a group of wayward journeyman college football players, however you'd like to phrase it, how do you create and more importantly maintain a culture where these guys have come from all different places? You need a culture that will not break with this massive influx of new personnel, new opinions, new backgrounds. You need something that's strong enough where they come in and they conform to the existing culture. And I believe he has a way of doing that. Having coached under Dabo Sweeney at Clemson, having experiences formerly at West Florida. The question is, does he have the guys? Does he have the locker room to buy in and do that? I hope so. I think we're going to find out very soon. They got a new offensive coordinator, Donnie Baker, heading into this season. Not sure between him and Coach Nobles who will handle the play calling responsibilities. I'll have to see on that. But lots of new faces coming on the defense. They have a strong reputation down there at West Florida. The 2024 team not only led all of Division II, but ranked first across all levels of college football in tackles for loss per game and yards per play allowed. 11 tackles for loss per game, 3.6 yards per play. 2 statistics that are just ridiculous. And defensive coordinator Cavell Connor is back for year 3. So to actually close it out here, Drew, the kind of a cool piece on them. We talked about it. Definitely go back and check out the episode where Coach Nobles came on the show. A massive new stadium coming to campus down in Pensacola, Florida for the Argonauts, and they actually just secured an additional $2 million grant. Head Coach Nobles, like I said on the show recently, definitely check out that episode where we discuss that stadium further. But before I pass out and run out of breath, Drew, please tell me about this West Alabama squad.
Yeah, before I get into West Alabama, though, Lumpy, that's potentially all-name team.
Lumpy DeWeese. We
love
have to
it.
get back to the all-name team. We did a graphic like a year ago or two. I think it was 2 years ago. Lumpy might be first team all-name in D2.
Lumpy DeWeese, you are on the watch list for all-name team. All for it. No, absolutely. You pretty much hit it on the head for one thing before we get going into West Alabama. You talked a lot about the culture, and I think a lot of it, when you have sustained success like West Florida does, it is almost like get in where you fit in. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to bring you in, but this is a culture that we as a staff, we as a university, we have established. You know what I mean? And so I think that it's one of those things where those guys know exactly what they're going to be getting into. And I'm sure during spring ball it was addressed like, this is our culture. And I think at the end of the day, teams that want to win and have the buy-in within that culture, they usually and typically win. So, so as far as getting into West Alabama, breakout season last year, 9-2, Tigers took a major step forward after back-to-back seasons of middle of the road, 5-5 and 5-6 in the 2 years prior. So the next question is, can they sustain it? 2025 is obviously going to be a new year, new team, but at the same time, you're going to be having guys that are going to be having bigger roles, guys who are going to try to build off their previous success. So I think that's a huge factor. When we look at the departures, it's a combination of a little bit of graduation and a little bit of portal, more on the graduation side for this one, Kobe. DeLawrence Butler, he is one of the portal transfers, though, as well as Alan Jones, who very good football player. Alan Jones was for the Tigers. And as far as graduation is concerned, Bry Webb was their leading rusher. Chris Benian, I believe it is, leading receiver. Travion Stanford, a running back. Travion Lambert, an edge rusher, who I believe had double-digit sacks a year ago, which at the Division II level, double-digit sacks, we all know, very impressive. And Lamar Gray, a defensive back. So as you can see, Kobe, they're kind of losing certain players at each little position group, right? Guy in the D-line, guy in the O-line, guy in the running back, guy in receiver, DB. But they're also bringing in not a lot, though. So they're bringing in two Mississippi College transfers, Caden Cup, the receiver, and Barrett Kane, the O-lineman.
Love that. So the Choctaws, of course, I don't know if you're familiar, Drew, but they actually had to shut down their football program. They're rebranding their entire institution, and football is on the way out at Mississippi College. So, again, to see those guys get new opportunities is really neat.
Yeah, so they're expecting them to come in and play, and, it's exactly what they would want as well, especially like when your university shuts down, it's like, what do I do? Oh, here's West Alabama, a very sustainable team that you can help win. What more could you ask for? So the questions that I had down, obviously I talked a little bit about, start 9-2 a season ago with a loss to Lenore Ryan in the playoffs. It was a tough loss. So how do you build on that? You just got a little taste of success. Let's keep going and let's keep building from that. Who steps up offensively? You lose a top rusher. You lose a top receiver. New playmakers are going to have to emerge to keep this offense rolling. You're expecting people to step up, not because you're not bringing in a ton from the portal. You're bringing in a receiver from Mississippi College, so you expect him to come in and play immediately. But who from the leading team that you had a year ago is going to step up and have a bigger role? But like we talked about, it's always nice when you lose guys to have a returning quarterback. And Spencer Arsenault, returning signal caller, very efficient.
Killed the pronunciation, by the way. Dude is a dog. And actually, not to cut you off again, but currently Spencer is at the Manning Passing Academy, which is a really, really sweet deal for him.
Well, I'm glad you said I killed it, because I was kind of using the whole Joe Burrow when he switched his last name to try to get that one right. I knew it had O at the end, so I believe I got that right. But yes, you're absolutely right. Spencer Arsenault seems like he's going to be a really good guy for them returning. we talk about it all the time, especially with quarterback. I think quarterback's the biggest. You know what I mean? Every position group is very much okay, another year under my belt, another year under my belt. But when a quarterback is like, okay, I like this check because I like this play right here. Oh, this concept's good in this type of play. Oh, I like this in the red zone. So it's like a quarterback understanding this offense really good, especially when you're losing a couple guys. Tyler Walker, expect him to potentially be the number one wide receiver going into 2025. He was, I believe, second on the team in rushing or receiving a year ago, so expect big things out of him. Ishmael Naylor returning. This is an older team, though, Kobe, I will say. Ishmael Naylor is going to be a fifth year. I believe Tyler Walker will be a fifth year. And then Spencer Arsenault should be a senior. And then you look at Cody Sigler, the defensive lineman. Expect him to step up as well, too, because he's not only was a junior a season ago, so he's like a younger guy, but at the same time, he still has a little bit of more football in him. So expect him big things. And then Isaac Williams as well in the defensive backfield. So not only did we talk about how they're losing guys in each spot, but there are guys that are ready to take that spot, not necessarily as quote unquote top dog, but to be the leaders in that room.
Yeah. 100%. To close it out, of course, the change of the reins at the helm of this program, bringing in Scott Cochran, the new head coach of the Tigers heading into 2025. And this is a guy who we've covered on the show a good bit. For those who don't know, Coach Cochran, longtime strength conditioning coach at Alabama under Coach Nick Saban, where he won multiple national championships, actually goes by Coach Yeah for the way that he was just constantly so vocal and on his guys, earned a lot of respect from those players. Actually has some former Alabama players and other personnel as a part of his staff here, Drew, which is a really neat deal. I'll have to give the full breakdown on that, but he's a guy who actually made the move after being with Coach Saban for a while, made the move over to be with Kirby Smart at Georgia and won quite a few games over there with the Bulldogs. Took a little bit of time away from the game of football to speak on substance abuse, which was something that he actually went through during his playing career. Very happy to have Coach Cochran back in the football world, this time at the Division II level. The Tigers spoiled to have him at the helm. Obviously haven't had as much contact with those guys. That's one team that I'm probably the most excited about heading into the fall, because I think there's a big question mark around them. I think we kind of know what to expect with some of the others. Of course, a lot of turnover at other spots. West Alabama is probably the most exciting team for me right now in the Gulf South.
Speaking of Coach Cochran, I mean, that's got to be really tough going from Nick Saban to Kirby Smart. Like, I can only imagine how, exhausting it was to go from one of the best to, or
See,
the
I wonder
best
if he
to
was
one
exhausted with them or they were exhausted with him, man. You watch some of that old tape. He was everywhere, and he let you know about it. I love it.
I think that's exactly what you need out of a strength coach, the guy who sets the tone immediately.
Dude,
And so you bring that energy, into a locker room, you bring that energy into the meeting room, guys are going to be pounding their head to run through the wall for him. That's exactly the type of energy that you want.
It's authentic, right? Like he has this track record in this background of being that guy. You don't come in and take the job and then start acting like an ass and doing all this yelling and shouting and hoorah, all this. You do that because that's who you are, and you've got decades of experience and things doing it that way, and that's the way you operate. Guys buy into that. Guys can sniff out phony very quick at every level. Guys can sniff out phony. Not the case with Coach Cochran, from everything I can tell.
Absolutely. Like, if you all of a sudden start a press conference with biting kneecaps, I'm pretty sure people can tell if you're being real or not.
Or, hey, and if you don't, and if you turn out to be a phony, you are never going to hear the end of it.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, look at the genius they hired before the kneecap guy. I mean,
terrible, bro. Terrible. But that's it for the Gulf South. A shorter kind of preview, so to speak, but not shorter in length. We did some good work there. I think we dove in and gave the people some good info, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fun because not only are we able to touch each conference, but we're also shedding light on guys that, this is what it's all about. You're not seeing these guys on SportsCenter unless it's on the top 10.
Yep.
Everybody gets a little shout out. It's great. And, we're doing great things here.
D3 football preseason rankings have just been dropped. This is the first of what will probably be a couple different outlets that put out Division III preseason rankings. These ones, Jimmy, coming from Lindy Sports. Give me the initial impression from the top 10, dude.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward here. I mean, I don't think it's super difficult to do preseason rankings. I mean, teams. I was kind of surprised that Johns Hopkins at 3. That's kind of interesting. But, yeah, I mean, no brainer with North Central at 1, Mount Union 2. So, I mean, other than that, I mean, there's a lot that could change throughout the season, obviously, but expect North Central and Mount Union to be 1 and 2 for most of the way.
Absolutely. You look at the two teams appearing in the Stag Bowl just a year ago. If you are the champion, in my opinion, you'd have to make a very strong case to be anywhere except for number 1, especially if you are North Central, of course, with the track record they've had in recent history. You go down the list, North Central at number 1, Mount Union at 2, Johns Hopkins coming in at number 3, Susquehanna at 4, and number 5, Hardin-Simmons down in Texas, St. John's at 6, Bethel out at 7, so 2 MIAC teams there back-to-back. At number 8 out of the ARC is Wartburg. Number 9 is UW La Crosse, and number 10 is Cortland, for those listening, to get all those names out there. And now we get to kind of dive into this, and I think this is something where we're not necessarily here to talk about what teams should or shouldn't be in the rankings. We're going to give you the breakdown of every team here, giving you 3 kind of key important details or information about these squads heading into 2025, and then maybe one thing that might hold them back, one thing that could be a detrimental factor for these squads heading into this season. And it should be noted too that information on this stuff this early on in the preseason, especially at the Division III level, is incredibly hard to come by. We're trying to make that better for y'all, trying to bring you some of this information. So Jimmy, I think with that being said, let's get this thing started with North Central, huh?
Yeah,
I'm excited about this group, man. I think this is going to be another really quality North Central team. And I will say, before we get going too, Athlink is where we get all of our information on transfer portals and other players. We mentioned things throughout this segment. And Jimmy, the main thing has to be the main thing with North Central. Brad Spencer, still at the helm for the Cardinals, and that means there's going to be a lot of success with this squad. He's led them to 3 straight national championship appearances. Of course, has won 2 of those games, most recently taking it over Mount Union. And then you go to the quarterback room. You're bringing in a lot of competition there. We'll talk about Luke Landon in a second. This is a room that through the transfer portal, the Cardinals have already supplemented with some outside talent. A couple of the guys are more of the status quo, guys who maybe are from the Naperville or more Illinois area, go off to a higher level D1 or D2, don't get the snaps or love they thought they would have received, and then found their way back to the hometown team. But there are a couple others in that room that have taken a little bit more of an untraditional path to North Central. I'm excited to see that. It's nice to bring in one new guy. It's even better to have really good competition for him, make one of those guys have to earn that spot. And I think the final point you need to know about this North Central team is the defense. It's always slept on. It's always overlooked because of guys like Lanin and guys out of the backfield like Sacco and these guys who have had these incredible seasons and performances for North Central. The defense is very commonly overshadowed. They are going to be a big piece of this squad, and they have already in the past. They've shown up in the playoffs for these teams. Guys like John Sullivan on the D-line back for another go-around. He had a 15 TFLs a year ago. Vincent Jacob, 5.5 sacks, ready to be disruptive on the line of attack there, and that kind of brings me to my last piece. No more Luke Lanin, the Gallardi Trophy winner, gone, currently in the UFL. I had a stint here with the Renegades, still, I believe, with them. We'll see how that shakes out over the course of the next season. He's a consummate winner, I think, in every term or phrase of that word. How do you go on without Luke Lanin, the guy who has come to represent North Central, dude? That's the tough part.
Yeah, and we're going to find out, obviously, and with North Central's offensive scheme, I'm sure they're going to be just fine. I think they'll have a guy come in there and ball out, but it's going to be tough to replace Luke Lanin without question. So we got Mount Union here at number 2. Head coach Jeff Dart continuing just dominance in over there. 56-4 record as a head coach with 5 straight OAC titles. Not only that, but they have 30. They're going for their 36th straight OAC title this year, Kobe.
That's unreal.
Kind of ridiculous. I mean, we've talked about the dominance of Mount Union before. They're also trying to extend their regular season win streak to 74-0. Just absolutely marvelous what's going on over there at Mount Union. Trying to get their 14th national championship last year. Came up short, and now that's what this year's for. They can get their number 14 this year. Quarterback Noah Beaudry, guy to definitely look out for. Weston Arthur, DB, and then obviously last week we talked about Giovanni Kennedy leading the offensive line, that run game. But obviously Caleb Brown, also a stud edge rusher for them as well. But losing Echeverry, they could have maybe a little bit of a trouble with that run game. But their O-line is just so dominant to where I think they're going to be able to run the ball effectively. But it's obviously, like we said about Luke Lanin, it's really tough to replace your superstar on offense for sure.
Yeah, but at the running back position, there are times where you can maybe get away with, when you have a really quality offensive front 5 in that unit, it's not to say that you could put any more running back there and have that same production, because that would be absolutely lying. And looking at what he's been able to do, and then even getting some pro looks Echeverry after last season, which was exciting to see. I think it was with the Bucks that he received an invite. I have to double check. But that's a neat deal. Another stat that I wanted to pull up here, Jimmy, and take a look at. The rankings Since 2003, the D3Football.com top 25 rankings, Mount Union has been ranked in every single poll since 2003 in the top 25. That is a ridiculous stat. Now, 7 other teams have been ranked 200 plus times. Mary Hardin Baylor's in there at number 2, Lynn Field at the top of that list. But Mount Union, every single poll since 2003, I just need to say that one more time, has been in the top 25 in the country. And of course, at the number 1 spot 131 times in that time span, Jimmy. Graphic courtesy of D3 Data on Twitter. They do some fantastic stuff. Give me the reaction to that, dude. You talk about a legacy and a long-standing program of tradition. That many times you're at the best of the best.
I have no words, really. I mean, those stats speak for themselves. I mean, I have nothing to say about it. I mean, holy cow. Like, what? It almost doesn't make sense, but then it also does because it's Mount Union. So. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And to keep things going, let's talk about coming in at the number 3 spot, Johns Hopkins, the Blue Jays. They're 12-2 a year ago. This is a team that has a proven track record of dominance, and dominance at home, I think, is a really key piece of understanding what the Blue Jays have been able to accomplish. But in 2024, semifinal appearance, 2023, made it to the quarters. They're 13-2, Jimmy, at home in that time span. They do not lose games on their home field. Their playoffs, regular season or otherwise, it's very difficult to go in there and get a win. Now, running back, Jeff Shorter, that's a guy you need to know about coming into this next year. 750 yards or so, 5 touchdowns in 2024. He'll be back for his senior campaign behind, again, we talk about a pretty dominant offensive line game. This has been a ground and pound team that has changed their identity, I think, over the last course of a couple seasons. We've seen them attack and get after it offensively in a variety of different ways. The ground game has always been a constant for Johns Hopkins. And, inside of the Centennial, there's not a front 5, I believe, better than this Johns Hopkins attack squad. And then you look on the other side of the ball, an anchor defensively for them. Carson Bordeaux, a veteran leader coming back, that side of the defensive ball. We had him on the show way back when. Might have to follow up with Carson here coming into this season. But the one thing that I think Johns Hopkins really has working against them, look at their schedule going into 2025. This is probably one of the toughest non-conference schedules, if not the toughest in the country. You look at their 3 non-conference opponents, Ithaca, John Carroll, and Susquehanna. Those are the 3 that they schedule out of conference outside of Centennial. Those 3 teams combined to post a 27-9 record in 2024. Just absolutely incredible. Their gauntlet of the first 6 games of the season is going to tell us a lot about this Johns Hopkins team. They could go from 3-1. They could go from 3 to left out. And that's in the first 3 weeks. That's going to be something that we see with a lot of these teams. But Johns Hopkins, I think, has it more than most. That one slip up, and you could be digging yourself out of a pretty deep hole. They've obviously gone and scheduled those games because they feel they are playing at that level of competition and can compete with that caliber of program, right?
Yeah, certainly. And they could also make their strength of schedule and strength of record bigger, better for the playoff tiebreakers, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Talk to me about one of those opponents they got.
Yeah, so the Riverhawks are at Susquehanna, 12-1 last year, winning their 2nd straight landmark conference title, advancing to the Division III playoff semifinals, I should say. The first time since 1991, with the absolute thrilling victory over Hobart last season, 42-35. That was a really, really great game. And then obviously last year, just an extremely high-powered offense, 45.5 points a game, which is 10th in the country, and 511 total yards a game at 3rd in the country. So they can light up the scoreboard for sure. Josh Ehrlich, landmark offensive player of the year, 2,400 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a semifinals for the Gagliardi last year. Another name to watch for them on the defensive side of the ball is Brian Layton, all-region defensive lineman.
Gagliardi, Jimmy. You got to remember Gagliardi, brother.
Yeah, Gagliardi. That's what I said.
Okay.
I said Gagliardi. Go back and watch
roll the tape.
Roll the tape. Yeah, we got it on tape. I said Gagliardi. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. And then obviously the defense had 33 sacks and 16 turnovers too last season. So these guys have a big wall on defense. I mean, they can definitely make some stops, turn the ball over. And Tom Perkovich, entering his 11th season as the head coach, 72-22 record.
Man,
not bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not bad. And back-to-back landmark titles, 2023 and 2024 as well. So they do have a couple offensive linemen to replace, so keep an eye on that one. But I'm sure they'll be just fine.
Yeah,
they'll be just fine.
absolutely. And that's a team that, again, we talk about, I put them right in almost the category of the Cortland, the Grove City, of some team that maybe a little bit further out east. They're in Pennsylvania, so not necessarily on the coast, but this is a team that kind of came from, I'm not going to say nowhere, they've been around, but they came in and really surprised some people just a few years ago, and they've built this thing into what is a national semifinal type contender, a team that believes they can compete for national championships, and they've done it very quickly. And this has turned from, again, a feel-good story into a team that has kind of really told people, hey, we're not going anywhere. This is something that we're planning to stay kind of the top of this national conversation. They're doing so far, and we'll see if that carries over. Again, obviously, Johns Hopkins, we talked about having Susquehanna on the schedule. That means the opposite is also true. So they're going to have chances very on to prove themselves. The offense from the Riverhawks is going to be, again, the mainstay for them. Can the defense step up in some of those games and help carry them through when the offense is a little bit slower earlier on? We haven't seen that a lot so much in terms of their offense has been able to click pretty early in games, but there will become a time where, as an opponent, they find a way to lock them down at least for a quarter or for a half. Can the defense step up in those instances and keep the boys going over there? So that's about it on Susquehanna. Let's move over to the next topic of conversation, that going down to the Lone Star State, man. Hardin-Simmons, the team that has been one of the best down there. And I say one of the because of recent, they have been the team to trump over Mary Hardin-Baylor. Now, maybe not when it mattered last year in the playoffs. And that's my first reason why I think this team really deserves to be talked about more going into the 2025. There has to be a fire lit down there under the ass of every single player, coach, staff member, community member in that Hardin-Simmons program, because you go and you beat Mary Hardin-Baylor, I believe twice in the regular season, and then you go because of the scheduling conflicts in the ASC, and then you go into the playoffs and you fall to them when it potentially matters most. And that is going to be something that, again, I've never been in their facility, would love to be. That better be put up on every poster, on every weight room rack, on every piece of the locker room. This is why we're doing all the things we're doing now in the offseason, so we never have to experience this again. That's my first reason why this Hardin-Simmons team should be dangerous. Now, on the actual on-field component of this, Jimmy, 4 of their 9 all-region players return from a year ago. They have a core group of leaders and playmakers inside of that group. One of them, running back Noah Garcia, almost 900 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns last year, was a big part of their ground game. Look for him to take an even bigger role and become a true bell cow for this Hardin-Simmons offense and kind of a leadership role in that. Now, talked about UMHB earlier. You can't talk about one without talking about the other. That is the biggest obstacle for this Hardin-Simmons team. As the ASC continues to grow a little bit with expansion of teams like Schreiner, McMurray, some of these other squads, UMHB is still in the ASC. And as long as they are, that game is likely to decide, one, who wins the conference championship, and of course with that, who is going to the national playoff and has a quote-unquote easier road of doing so given the auto bid. So it feels unjust to talk about one of these teams without the other because they have been so intertwined as of late. This Hardin-Simmons team, though, what you need to know about them is that they're going to be explosive, they're going to attack, and I think they're going to be poised for a really big breakout year, Jim.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I think like you said, it's really, really hard to beat a team 3 times. Like last season, I mean, Hardin-Simmons might have been the better team over the year, but it's really hard to beat a team 3 times, and they've obviously fallen short in the playoffs there. But moving over to St. John's, the Johnnies. Gary Fashion coming in his 12th season as head coach, 110-20 as a coach, 6-time MIAC Coach of the Year, and they coming off a MIAC championship last year as well. They might have a little bit of a new defensive scheme with Coach Novak in his first season as a defensive coordinator. So defense should be solid over there. They do have a little bit of graduation turnover. They're losing a couple key starters, especially on the D-line. Should test their depth quite a lot. And obviously, their offense is playmaker central. I mean, they've just got tons and tons of guys that can go out and make plays. Mm-hmm. They have a really seasoned player core. I mean, they have tons of guys that can do what they got to do. And another thing I want to mention, attendance at St. John's is ranked 2nd in Division II. An average attendance last year, so they always have a really, really good home crowd.
That's
That
awesome.
home field advantage can be big for them. But another thing, like, can they make the Final Four? Can they make the national championship? Like, can they make those strides to get back to that like realm of prominence? Because obviously, like, they're going to go and win 9-10 games this year, but can they like go get a ring? Can they go host a trophy above their head? I'm sure that's what they're all talking about right now. They can go win the MIAC, they can go do this and that, but like they want to win the big one.
Yep. And to do that, Jimmy, they got to go around this Bethel squad, right? That is the obstacle inside of that conference. That is the obstacle for the St. John's team. they were able to do it not once but twice last year. These two teams faced off twice inside of MIAC play. St. John's, they got the better half of Bethel. My number one note for this Bethel Royals team is that you have dominated, it's in all caps here, inside of conference play against everyone except for St. John's. That is the proverbial hurdle for this Bethel team. They got beat twice last year by the Johnnies. The rematch, Jimmy, this year set for October 4th on Bethel's home field. That will be kind of the decider inside of conference play, and again, with a lot of playoff implications on the line. Now, this Bethel Royal squad, 11-3 a year ago, did a lot of great things defensively. Of course, Matt Young, the guy who a lot of people know the name of, going on to play at Wisconsin. Yeah, that's a big loss for them. I'd be remiss to sit here and tell you it wasn't. He was one of the, if not the best playmaker on the defensive side of the ball in the country, relative of any level of football. He put up those type of statistics, but they had a lot more going for them than just the DB core. I don't know if you know this, Jimmy. They had the most sacks in D3 football last year. 66 times they were able to bring down the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage.
That's a lot of sacks.
66?
That's a lot of sacks. It's a lot.
That's like a stupid number.
What? They played 14 games last year. That's like 4.8 sacks a game.
Yeah, it was almost 5. It's like a stupid number. 66 sacks a year ago. They have been able to get to the quarterback better than anyone in the country, obviously, in that time span. A lot of it, of course, comes down to having quality players. But a big piece of that is scheme. Can you draw up pressures? Can you draw up different ways to trick the quarterback and offensive line to get them into a advantageous or disadvantageous position, depending on the side that you look at it? You can definitely expect that scheme, those different blitz packages and other ways they're able to get to the quarterback to shine through no matter who is at these spots, because they're going to return some talent. Now, of course, on that defensive line, you miss a couple big-time playmakers that are obviously going to make that number. You'd imagine it won't be 66 again, but you never know. And, I think the other piece of this is that they've got strong young leadership with Mike McElroy at the helm. He is a defensive mastermind that's got some good coaching experience, a lot of years of great ball ahead of Coach McElroy down there with Bethel. And from what I can tell, all three first-team All-American selections from a year ago are gone. So they're going to be needing new people to step up at those positions. Young was one of them. They had a defensive lineman that was the conference player of the year type caliber player. And you're going to have to replace those guys. And you're not going to be able to replace their production, but you're going to have to figure out how you can fit other people into the scheme and make them accomplish the same kind of deals there, Jim.
No, certainly. And then jumping down to Wartburg here, 10-2 last season. Coach Chris Winter entering his 5th season as the head coach, going 43-7 over his last 5 seasons. Pretty good. They're at number 8. Good. 3 ARC titles, back-to-back years. 3 Conference Coach of the Year awards, and a National Coach of the Year award in 2022. So they have definitely some very strong leadership over there for the Knights. Very stable offense coordinator situations too with Matt Wheeler and Matt. I know it. Tishetter. I'm sorry, I've just botched that name. Pardon me, folks. But Dawson Rudd, coming off a great season last year, returning as their primary rusher, had a huge game against Platteville last year, running for 155 yards in that playoff game. They have a really balanced, hot, powerful offense. They're going to have a really solid year. And obviously, we talked a lot about really good defensive fronts. Wartburg is one of them. Just year after year, just elite defensive front seven. Very, very stout run game, generating turnovers like crazy. They have tons of really, like I said earlier, they built their coaching staff on experience and leadership, and they've been very stable in that regard. And then Watson Hoover Stadium also gets pretty lit too. I mean, they're going to have a pretty strong crowd there just about every night. And then, like we said about St. John's, can Wartburg take down a team like North Central? Can they take down a Mount Union? Can they do this? Can they do that? And I think they can.
Yeah. They were very close very recently. That North Central Wartburg game, they've had multiple big-time matchups, but that playoff match, I believe, was a semifinal. That was a down-to-the-wire type performance, I believe, 2 years ago, I want to say off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yep. I was live tweeting during that game. I actually remember that. That was a really good game.
It was nuts. And, to keep things moving on, this is something that, we can talk about a little bit, but the only WIAC team included in this top 10, Jimmy, that being UW La Crosse, the Eagles, coming off an 8-4 season that I think a lot of people, maybe from the outside in, thought was disappointing, but you look at the schedule they had, and yeah, they dropped a couple games that I'm sure Coach Janis and company would like to have back. They have a lot of things to be excited about going into this year. Matt Janis, start with him. 4 straight playoff appearances coming out of what is far and away the nation's toughest conference, right inside of the WIAC. Consistency is key with him. Can you take the next step? We talked about that with a couple of these teams. if you are Lacrosse, can you go and win the conference outright and give yourself, unlike last year, give yourself that predetermined spot in the playoffs, and then from there earn yourself home field advantage like we saw them do 2 years ago, right? North Central had to come to their place to play on their turf, and that game turned out to be incredible. So can you do that if you're Matt Janis and company down there? The running back, Gabe Lynch, the dude is deceivingly powerful. We've seen it in person, watching this guy play. He is a great mix of speed and power that comes in a small package. I think people underestimate him on a week-to-week basis. You look at the stat line for him, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns in 24. He's joined in the offensive backfield by Kyle Haas, the quarterback there. 2,200 yards, 20 touchdowns a year ago, Jimmy, to only 6 interceptions. Coming into a season that he should be, from what I can tell, the true quarterback one in that system. What we can tell, though, about the guys down at UW Lacrosse, they're not afraid to put multiple guys in that role. They have a revolving door, so to speak, at that position. We saw it with guys like Helterbrand, who maybe brought a different spin and flair to the quarterback position and using his legs and the way they were able to utilize him. It will be interesting if they forego that style, with Haas seemingly coming back with the most experience inside of this offensive playbook, or if they continue to bring in and supplement with some other skill sets around a guy like Kyle. But again, the one thing kind of holding them back, like many of these teams that play in these tough conferences, one slip up could cost you a conference title. And in that case, it could be a playoff berth, because you lose one game, all of a sudden you might be out of WAC contention. Now with a team or a conference like that cannibalize each other week to week, you never know. Of course, we saw how it planned out this year with Platteville taking the crown when it came down to it. But there's zero room for error in the conference. And I think that's the one thing that is going to be either great or it's going to hurt a team like UW Lacrosse, man.
No, for sure. And a lot of people kind of had their eyes, they're like, what? Lacrosse got in the playoffs this year? Like, what? They went 7-3. It was kind of like one of those things. It's like, you get in. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of teams in the WIAC that want to see them not do very well. But
I'm sure the sentiment goes both ways all around. I believe that, dude. I believe it. Finish us off here, number 10.
Yeah, the Red Dragons at Cortland, obviously coming off a great season last year, ranking 3rd nationally in scoring with 55 points per game. Very startling, eye-popping numbers there. Also 516 yards per game. Just a very high-octane air raid and run game as well. But they're losing their boy, Zach Boyes. Really good guy, really good player. Really good player. So we'll have to see what they do at quarterback. But obviously, Cortland's a very, very prominent program, very successful, long track record of success. I'm sure they'll find a guy that can come in there and ball out for him. But that should be a 4-way battle between Joe Young, Craig Galea, Steve Atremba, and Mikey Riskindio. Sorry, guys, Riskindio. But they had a 4-way battle this spring with those guys. I was just digging some stuff up. That's what I found. But their defense is also not too shabby as well. 11.5 points a game last year, 13th nationally. And this was that really stood out to me. They held their opponents to a 21% third down conversion rate on defense.
Yeah.
That's how you win football games right there. Getting stops on third down. Like, that is so big right there. That's an incredible number.
Of course. And the biggest question for them, of course, the switching at the helm, right? That's the biggest deal for any program like Cortland. You lose Kurt Fitzpatrick. He goes up to the D1 level at Colgate. You bring in Coach Blumenauer. He's got a 21-11 record from Franklin and Marshall. And we kind of talked about it earlier. When you talk about this Cortland team that came off a national championship, they lose guys like Cole Burgess and J.J. Lapp on the outside. They're 2 top pass catchers, the 2 best receivers in the country, some would say, at that time in this place. But you had Zach Boyes. You had Zach Boyes under center. So did it, we were wondering, would that matter? They came back and they made another run. We saw that Zach Boyes was enough to get them over the hump. Now, without him under center, without him leading the offensive attack, can they accomplish the same feat? A lot of that TBD. But that rounds out the top 10 of Lindy Sports preseason rankings. And I'm just excited to get things going, man. I think we'll just leave it at that. We're not going to talk too much about who needs to be in, who doesn't. We'll leave it at that, and then we'll get talking about some more individual guys as the season gets closer, brother.
Yeah, I'm surprised we didn't talk about River Falls today, because we talk about them like every single time on the show. I'm surprised we didn't talk about them today.
Shut up. Oh, brother. I appreciate you, man. That was solid.
Yeah, that was awesome. Awesome.
See you, buddy. We actually have one more Division III topic to touch on tonight, and that is talking about Pacific Lutheran. This is one that's very interesting. They've guaranteed $3,000 to student athletes through a partnership with Open Doors. PLU has been a leader in the NIL space. They became just the second D3 school to sign with Open Doors back in 2021 while launching the first NIL marketplace in D3 with Open Doors in 2022. So they have been innovators and leaders inside of this space. That continues. The innovative new package will generate at least $3,000 annually in NIL opportunities for the Lute student athletes. At a D3 level, that is incredible. People thought maybe NIL wouldn't trickle down to D2, to D3, and NAIA. These schools are making opportunities happen for their student athletes, and it's for the better good of all parties. This latest step includes access to the Open Door Sales Plan. It is a first-of-its-kind solution in D3 athletics. It equips the PLU team with dedicated support from Open Doors brand sales team, and then the Lute student athletes will receive increased visibility and direct access to brand partnerships and promotional opportunities. So, in short, a really neat deal for Pacific Lutheran, providing these opportunities to all of their student athletes, not just their football players there at PLU. And I also wanted to highlight just a couple of great examples of athletes, especially at the D3 level, using their NIL and these opportunities for the greater good and kind of for acts of service. A guy that we have talked about and we have talked about before, Carter St. John. I mean, that's one, the quarterback from Alma who started QB's vs. Cancer. It is an organization of his that has quarterbacks from the Division III level across the country sign up and join him in the fight against cancer. They actually do training sessions with youth quarterbacks, and when the youth quarterbacks pay for those training sessions, all of that money the quarterback raises goes towards a cancer foundation of their choice, potentially sometimes in their local area. So a very neat deal of what Carter St. John and QB's vs. Cancer have done. And then, of course, we talked with TJ earlier in the episode to look what he's doing over at Bethany College to help some of those flood victims and people whose homes maybe were uprooted in kind of that natural disaster. So a shout out and a salute to both those guys, but let's continue with the NAI portion of the pod. National contender or a sleeper pick, a dark horse squad that could go all the way. Tonight we're talking NAI football, myself, Matt Schwarzler. Matt, what's up, buddy?
Not much, man. Just hanging out, getting ready for the football season already.
Liar. New gig. This is the first time we've had you on here since the new job. First of all, congratulations. Tell the people what you do for a real living, my friend.
Yeah, so I have just accepted a job at my alma mater, Dakota Wesleyan University, sports information director. I have moved back to Mitchell. Here in the thick of it, getting things ready for next season, but still got time to talk NAIA football because it's just – I'm so pumped for this coming season, dude. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm excited, but I'm more excited that we have you to be a part of it, my friend. You've earned it. I think that's going to be an awesome role for you. But again, I'm just pumped that I get to have you alongside me. I'm constantly learning more and more about NAIA football, but you're a guy that's literally lived it, played it, and has covered it much more in depth and longer than I have. And so tonight we're talking sleepers and contenders. Our sleeper is a not top 25 team, could be on the fringe, could be at the bottom of a conference, someone who we think can make a run and is poised to do so in 25. The contender speaks for itself, a team that really should have a chance at the national championship this fall. Start us up. I teed it up for you. Tell me who your contender is for the fall of 25.
Yeah, well, you want to start so amiably. Let's talk about Friends. Let's get friendly. The Friends Falcons. They are my contender. I really wanted to talk about Montana Western, but I talked about them all last season. So I wanted to mention, a team that maybe doesn't get as much shine on this show or in other shows as you might listen to. But the Friends Falcons coming off of an 11-2 season, finished 4-1 on their side of the KCAC Kessinger last season. And their season came to an end when they lost to Grandview, the national champions, by only 4 points, 21-17 result. I mean, we saw what Grandview did in the national championship last year. That was probably the most competitive game they were in all that season. And I think it bodes really well for you, especially when you look at their SP plus splits. They were the 12th best team overall in the metrics, a top 20 offense, a top 14 defense. And it all starts on the offensive side of the ball with your rushing attack. And Cavante Baker, second team all-conference quarterback, doesn't tell the entire story. They run a triple option. So obviously Cavante Baker's doing a lot more running, but man, he is a machine and absolutely going to take this team to new heights.
He absolutely is. And you and I think, have covered it at maybe at different points, or at least have read about it. But his story and the way that he found Friends University and the Falcons is a very interesting one. And hearing from his coach and people around there, he says, Coach Harrison, the quote here is, anybody in Wichita who's watched him play knows he's a little league legend here. Someone who tore it up all the way from the little league into high school and beyond. He goes on to his first year at Ellsworth Community College. Injuries kind of derail his career from there, and he steps away from football entirely. And that's something for a lot of people, that would be it. That would be, to call it quits right there. He says in 2021, after the birth of his daughter, Avilia, that it, quote, changed a lot, especially having a little girl, because it softened me up a little bit, which is such a neat deal to hear from him. He talked about looking at life differently and now continuing to work, still being away from football after the birth of his daughter. He reconnects with the former high school coach, Terry Harrison, to be the quarterback of his rebuild at Friends University. And so you take this long path away from football, and it's something like having a child, having this daughter, and also an old acquaintance of the high school coach taking the job at Friends to get him back involved. And he has been the catalyst for this Friends offense and the way they're able to attack and be multidimensional with him under center, dude.
Yeah, and obviously I can't speak on his experience, but just going through all of that, coming out the other side, still coming back to football, I mean, it's pure joy at this point. He's having a blast out there. He's playing really well. And not to mention, I can imagine you're having a lot of fun when you also have a first-team all-conference running back coming back in Elias Pino and a first-team all-conference fullback. How many times do you see that? And Nick Cordova, the core of Baker, Pino, and Cordova, combined last season for 37 touchdowns, 2,841 yards. I mean, that is
goodness,
unreal production, and they're all coming back. And not to mention on the defensive side of the ball, you also bring back Barrett Rhodes, who's been kind of a cornerstone of your defense up there on the defensive line. 26 tackles last season, 12 tackles for losses, and 9 sacks going into his senior season. Also a first-team all-conference guy. I am so excited to watch this team play, especially in an insanely competitive KCAC this year. Something that I've kind of seen with the preseason in this conference is that both the Kessinger and Bissell divisions, they do like named divisions. It's not like West and East.
Yeah, and that just changed, I believe, in recent years, right? Pretty recently.
Yeah, it's in the past couple of years, and they even this year have reshuffled a couple of things, which obviously makes the division super competitive. I think they did a good job this year. But even then, I still think Friends is just like top of the pecking order in this conference. Also want to mention for Friends this season, there are a couple keys that they should really focus on. My first note here is play FU football. What do you think FU stands for,
Cody? Friends University.
You bet it does.
There we go.
But also, what else FU could stand for? That's also kind of what I'm getting at there. This triple option style of football. Not only do you want it to reflect your program and how you've built that up in the few years that they've been there. Terry Harrison has done a wonderful job going into year 3 with this program, peaking at the absolute right time. But they got to be confident in their identity. I made a note here that it kind of reminds me of Dort in previous years, how we talk about them. It's an attitude of, we know that you know what we're doing. Like, it's a triple option at the end of the day. Like, there are a few things on defense you can do to trap it and try to regulate it. But like, at the end of the day, we're just going to line up in front of you and be better than you because we care more. We think we're better. And they really have to take that attitude. Obviously, you have the resume to back it up. Not so much an underdog anymore like you might have been in years previous. You're kind of a top dog and people know that. Be confident in it. Let's see it on the field. Let's see it with these 3 guys rushing for almost 3,000 yards again and putting up 40 touchdowns or whatever they're going to do. I think it's going to be a really good season for them. They don't lose much on either side of the ball. And as long as everybody could stay in tandem, keep everybody on the same page, especially with this style of team that you run the ball, triple option, like that is super dependent on your defense being in sync with the pacing of the offense. It is absolutely crucial when you're managing the game in the way that you do when you run triple option. It's a lot more methodical. You have to plan it out more. You have to manage your time. So as long as you can keep that together, which I have no reason to believe they won't, I am super excited to see what this team can do beyond the postseason. Maybe they get another shot at a team like Grandview. But yeah, pretty exciting for them. Also a couple other contenders to watch for. outside of Friends, I mentioned Montana Western. Morningside is back. If you know the GPAC, that's not much of a surprise, but they absolutely reloaded and are a very scary team. Evangel, another KCAC team to note, and Benedictine is also another one to watch.
Bring back FU football. Get it on a t-shirt.
We love FU football.
Got to be all in on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately up to them. I know their marketing department probably wouldn't appreciate it.
Maybe I have several heart attacks with the distribution of that.
We can make it work, I think. I mean, that's their problem, not ours, right? So
we should. And flipping it over, man, tell me about a squad that you think's flying under the radar right now has got a good chance to make some noise in 25.
For sure. Going from FU to GU, Graceland in the Heart North Conference, 7-4 record, 5-1 in conference last year. A team that has traditionally been a bottom dweller in the Heart, but they pretty much are solely carried off the back of Gerald Monroe, first team all-conference guy, probably one of your player of the year candidates across the entire country. This is a guy who's averaging 156 yards a game in receiving yards, with 22 touchdowns, and that's just on 84 catches. I mean, a total of 1,562 yards.
That's unreal.
Absolutely ridiculous. And it's really important that Cade Ross, their starting quarterback, all signs point to anyways, I haven't heard otherwise, being kind of the catalyst for getting that guy the ball, was producing, decently last year and has some experience, but last year got a full season under his belt. He's dealt with some injuries and wasn't starting the entire season in his previous experience, but he has a full season under his belt. And while, 51% clip passing isn't what you'd, hope and pray for, you're still putting up 33 touchdowns. You're still putting up 2,700 yards and only 14 picks. That's still a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio. So as long as you can keep that core together, get Cade Ross confident, got him feeling like an upperclassman like he should be, this is a team that can really make some noise and nip at the heels of Grandview, which is something that we haven't seen in forever out of anybody in this conference.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's big time. Yeah, team. I think that's a perfect pick then. A team that, again, historically maybe not lived up to those expectations. You have a solid core coming back and guys who seemingly under the same leadership should continue to grow maybe into more of those leadership roles and, of course, the capabilities when it comes to on the field, man. And what about that 2025 schedule when it comes to the Yellow Jackets this fall?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see for them because I feel like the prove it games for them are going to be outside of their side of the conference. They'll be playing Benedictine and they'll be playing Baker from the south portion of the Heart. And those are two top 15, top 20 teams. So if you're in a spot where you beat who you're supposed to beat, you have a good game against Grandview, and you can take one off of a ranked Baker or a ranked Benedictine, you're first in line to get an at-large bid. Because those are two, we joke about quality losses in college football all the time, but like reigning national champion and, another potentially top 10 team, like that's a really good resume to have as long as you can handle business. And I think too, interesting to note, much like we talked about Friends, this is another program that is in that year 3 upswing. Head coach Patrick Ross has done an amazing job with this program. Like I've said, they were a perennial bottom dweller, and to go 7-4 last year and have a really good showing and have somebody like Gerald Monroe show out and make national headlines, it'll be interesting to see. They also, receiver wise, haven't been able to confirm this, so I'm not going to go too in depth, but Dejuan McDougall was also a first team, second team all conference guy for them last year, receiver specialist as a return guy, and all signs indicate he's not with the program anymore. Not going to confirm what other program he might be at because I just don't have that information offhand, but all signs point to that being the case. So I'm curious to see what the transition there will be, who you want to plug in there. But obviously you still have Gerald leading the way. And I think this is just such a talented team, such a high-powered, explosive team that can really catch people sleeping.
Yeah, and that second option at wideout is important, especially for a guy if you're in Gerald's shoes where at the wide receiver 1 position, yes, you're going to draw the most talented defensive back. You're typically going to draw some extra coverage depending on, they might scheme something up where they have an extra guy in that area. If they know kind of some of those tendencies, when you bring in a quality wide receiver 2 or 3 and you bring in a tight end that can open up the middle of the field and some of these things, that's where you allow your top playmaker to shine because the defense cannot afford to put all this energy and focus on you.
Yeah. It'll be really, like I said, interesting to see what the adjustment is there. They had some decent running back production, but this is a team that's airing it out a lot of the time. I mean, Cade Ross has a massive clip in his pass attempts. Like, makes a lot of sense that they want to get it done through the air. So got to plug somebody in there. I think also a couple other teams to watch for besides this very talented Graceland team. Valley City State is on my list. I am very bullish on how many people they return. Ottawa, Kansas, a one-win team that has the most all-conference honors I've ever seen in my entire life.
Really?
Bring most of those guys back. And this was a team a couple of years ago that was in a playoff spot as a 6-5 team. Don't count Ottawa out just because they had a down year last year. They had a top 50, they had a top half in the country defense going 1-10. I mean, there's some pieces there that you can definitely work with. And my last team to note, McPherson, very bullish on this team. Don't know whether to talk about them in the contender tier or the dark horse tier because they are that good to where they could probably get an at-large bid to the playoff. Problem is you have friends in Southwestern and, one of the teams you're going to talk about here in a moment on their side of the conference as well. So
just the side of the conference is egregious. Yeah. It's outrageous. It really is. And we'll talk about that absolutely in a second. But the team I want to talk about first in terms of my contender status being Ottawa, Arizona, OUAZ. Not sure how they typically pronounce that one, Uaz or something around those lines. But, of course, a couple of them got to make the distinction state-wise. This is a team, though, that you talk about those SP plus splits, man. This is one of those squads that is right up on the top of that mountain, the best in the country. 8th overall, 2nd in offense. 8-2 a year ago in 2024. They finished 16th in those final standings in the NAIA top 25. And they lost to the team that you just mentioned, Friends University. They take them out in the first round of the playoffs, 47-35. A really high-scoring affair for a triple option type offense. So that's one that definitely had to go back through and do a little bit of research on in terms of how they approached that game and that style. And Friends, again, to talk about them a little bit more, for them to stay in a game like that, that's not typically a triple option type game when you're talking about possessing the ball for a large majority and taking that time of possession away and not allowing the other offense to even get on the field, right? Keeping the defense on the field for the majority of it. Ottawa, Arizona has the ability to strike so quickly on offense, and that's what allows them to outpace even the teams like Friends and others in those categories. Now, one of the biggest storylines around them coming into the 2025 season is a change at the leadership. New head coach in Riley Murphy down there in Arizona. He becomes only the second coach in program history following Mike Nesbitt and his departure from the program. Most recently, he was the offensive coordinator at NAIA St. Thomas, Florida, or St. Thomas University in Florida, who we've talked about on this show, had Tay Farmer on pretty recently. That offense was one that lit up scoreboards across the country last year, and I think that is a big reason why he was a top candidate for this job. Last year, they finished as a top 5 team in the country, regardless, across the nation. Prior to that, though, got stops at Division II, Gannon, Lake Erie, Fayetteville State, and others across a bunch of different levels. So he will be the new man in charge of this program and this offense. He's taken struggling programs to new heights. People who are familiar with Division II, you know that Lake Erie and Gannon maybe a little bit more success than the former of those two programs, not perennial powerhouses. What he has done is gone in there and given some of those programs the most wins they've had in recent history. And so it'll be very interesting for me to see what he can do with a team that's built to win now, as opposed to a team that has a struggled and maybe a little bit of a not so prominent past. You're coming into a program right now that is set up to succeed right away. And so the expectations for him are going to be a lot different than what he's used to in the past. But to get to talk about the guys, they return a lot of pieces from that 2024 team, and it all starts under center for this squad, as it does with most. You bring back at quarterback Luke Gyron, 2,500 yards, 36 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions a year ago, with almost 300 yards on the ground with this guy. And what you're getting out of Luke is a 6'1", 195-pound quarterback, over 5,000 passing yards in his career already. He was a 2024 first-team All-Sooner Athletic Conference selection. And then I look at, with quarterbacks, especially on teams that are performing well, how do you perform in the big game? And when you look back at the playoff performance from him just a year ago, 4 passing touchdowns, 396 yards in that playoff game. That was not the reason they couldn't get it done. And so if you got a guy at quarterback that can show up in the big moments, which I think is what they have down there in Ottawa, you're going to be set up for success. Now, his favorite target on the outside, they bring him back as well. Wide receiver Devicious Wilson, 24 catches, 620 yards, and 11 touchdowns a year ago. And I think what you notice right there, they spread the ball out. There wasn't necessarily one guy that ate up all the receptions on this offense. It was a balanced attack for this Spirit team. He's 6'5", Matt, 190 pounds. He's got a massive catch radius and is a guy that assuredly should be the go-to target this fall when it comes to the passing attack. It was a third-team All-American selection from the AFCA. And finally, on the defensive side of the ball, Justice Sosnicki, 54 tackles, 5 TFLs, got a couple PBUs last year, should be an anchor on this defensive side of the ball, grow into more of a leadership role. Again, 6'2", 220 pounds, a guy who has the frame to play at this level and probably the next, if we're being honest. 11 tackles in the playoff game last season. Again, I look back at those games. How do you show up when the lights are brightest? And to go down a little bit further, trying to verify some of these portal additions, from what I could tell, Khalil Damper, a wide receiver from Missouri Valley, will be making the move over there. He didn't see much time with the Vikings in 24, but again, a wide receiver core that is a very balanced attack. Look for him to get in the mix in 25. They pick up Corey Ardrey from Bethany. He's a defensive back, 30 tackles, 2 fumble recoveries, a pick just a year ago. And finally, Josiah Curry-Fulgham, previously at Lawrence Tech, Ferris State, Indiana Wesleyan, a journeyman type of college football guy, making his kind of last stand, so to speak, with this Ottawa, Arizona squad here. And it's going to be not an easy go for this Spirit team when it comes to 2025. You look at the schedule for these guys. We take a peek here at the 2025 schedule. They open things up, maybe not with the most crazy part of their schedule against Wayland Baptist, Nelson. Then you get into Oklahoma Panhandle. Things start to ramp up with Texas College and Arizona Christian and Texas Wesleyan, Louisiana Christian. Some of those teams on there that a lot of NAIA football fans will know, but that's all the notes I got on this Ottawa Spirit squad. I'm excited to follow along with them in the fall. Anything you think I missed off the top of your head?
No, I mean, I think too with that schedule, it's important to note that while the opponents kind of ramp up, they go home and then 4 straight games on the road.
Yep.
That is tough. That is extremely tough for any team, no matter how good or bad the opponent is. Will be really interesting to see how they do. But like you mentioned, such a balanced offensive attack, a team that has always been known for a potent offense, but it's sustainable. You talked about the balanced attack. You talked about how they spread the ball out. That means that guys, like, replaceable sounds a bit degrading, but like, truthfully, you can throw people in wherever and have them succeed. That is a good system to be running. The fact that they had the second best offense in the entire country last year and they reload most of those guys. I mean, these guys are probably going to be putting up 50 points a game. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I think that's a terrific nod. Excited to see down the stretch too, ending with Texas Wesleyan and Louisiana Christian will tell us a lot about this team heading into the postseason.
Absolutely. And my sleeper pick, maybe a little bit of an easy pick here, is they were right on the outside of the top 25 looking in. Kansas Wesleyan. We go back to the KCAC for good reason, because the level of football in there right now, from what I can tell, is top notch. 7-5 in 24. So they still, I think, apply for this sleeper status under our given criteria. You look at their SP plus splits, not anything to jump off the page. A top 20 defense a year ago, a balanced offensive attack, nothing that was earning them maybe national accolades as an entire unit. They made the playoffs. They got bounced by 1 score to Dickinson State in the first round. And again, we're talking about another program here, Matt, that will be under new leadership come this fall. Matt Middleton takes the reins over there at Kansas Wesleyan, and he came to KW in December after 2 seasons as an assistant at D2 powerhouse Harding, which is a very interesting deal. Of course, you talk about the triple option earlier with friends. Harding is known for the flex bone offense, that different kind of integration or style of triple option. Very different, but a hard-nosed style of football that they have been able to win at a very high level with, including a national championship run. And you go talk about this guy. He's been coaching since before I was born. That's 2001 for those of you who may be unfamiliar. This guy's been doing it literally forever in terms of my lifespan. He's got high school experience, all the way to Division I, and in between, he is a lifer. That's what we call guys like this, a dude who has spent his life devoted to the game. His athletic director says, quote, "This is a home run hire for the Coyotes down there, which is a neat deal. Now, you go in talking about some more recent news with this squad. Following the spring game, this is directly from Coach. He says, quote, "We've got to go get some immediate help. We got to go get some people to come in to be in the two deep right now and help us." He says, anytime you have a team that loses 33 seniors and a lot of others, you're in a situation where you're replacing a whole lot of production. We got a lot of spots that we can fill in. And that's one of the reasons I think they qualify as that sleeper pick. I think a lot of people count them out because of the turnover to graduation, to transfer portal, and otherwise. And then, of course, to kind of fast forward to their conference a little bit, the other big reason they qualify for this sleeper status, so to speak, is you look at the KCAC, the way that it resets every 2 years, those two conference divisions. And you talked about it earlier. This year, they share the division with McPherson, Friends, Southwestern, two of which finished as top 25 teams a year ago. The other one on the outside looking in. The rest of the opponents in there, of course, not exactly chopped cheese, but should be a good competition for this Kansas Wesleyan squad. And to close it out, some big-time returners for these guys. I think you have to start with the guy that was really the bell cow and the focal point of this offense for Kansas Wesleyan out of the offensive backfield, that being running back Luke Armstrong. This is a guy that, again, was the focal point of the offensive attack a year ago for this Kansas Wesleyan team. He's got a great blend of speed. He's got shift. He's got power. 182 carries, almost 1,500 yards, and 16 touchdowns for the 5'11", 190-pound running back. To me, what stands out in the film right away, you saw it right there, open field cuts, those are dangerous. But to me, what I really liked watching him play, he's a decisive runner. He doesn't show hesitation. You don't always see that, Matt, from a team that has a lot of zone-style type schemes. Now, they will get some gap scheme in there. You see them pull the guard and the tackle watching some of their film from a year ago, and that's something that with that balance, to have a guy that is decisive in his cuts and his movements, he doesn't waste any movement, no false stepping or anything in the backfield that allows him to get out into the open field very quickly. Also, big piece of the special teams. Return man, 630 return yards a year ago, 2 touchdowns. He was an NAIA first-team All-American. Oh, out of breath, but that should tell you all you need to know about this guy. I mean, the dude is a dog. What do you know about Luke, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, just an absolute workhorse. I mean, he can do everything for you. And it's somebody that you want to build your offense around, especially coming off of what you might call a down year for your program, even though you still made the playoffs and squeaked in and had a competitive game there. It's funny you mentioned like not knowing how to name this team as a dark horse. When I did my KCAC preview, they were my dark horse pick as well. It's very weird to say that about a team that is coming off of a playoff run. But you talk about guys like, Luke, who are coming back. You talk about guys like Josh King Bradley, who are coming back. Absolutely humongous on both sides of the ball. And not to mention, there's a lot of transfers you have coming in. Like Coach said, they need help, and they're starting to get some of that help.
They absolutely are. And then I'll switch over and talk about one of the guys on the defensive side of the ball here at the defensive line spot, Josh King Bradley. This is a guy, 13 sacks a year ago for this Kansas Wesleyan defense, 17 and a half tackles for loss, 56 total tackles on the year. And this was an interesting one for me. He entered the portal officially, got offers from Kaiser, Grandview, amongst other NAIA and top Division II institutions. He decides, from what everything I can tell, he decides he is coming back to finish out his career at Kansas Wesleyan, which is a really big-time pickup for the Coyotes down there. Third-team All-American in 2024, the second highest sack total in all of the NAIA a year ago. So a big-time get for Coach Middleton and company down there. Just to get him back, I should say, to make sure you retain guys like that. And you look in the transfer portal. They brought in 3 transfer quarterbacks, which is something you don't see very often. Henry Ostad from Southeastern, J.D. Gallman from Washita Baptist, and then Coach's son, Caden Middleton from Arkansas Monticello. And that's something that is great to have competition in that room. I think I've talked about it a little bit before with some other teams. Henry started at quarterback all 9 games for the Fire last year, threw for almost 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. Should probably be the front runner going into this year. But again, you've got competition, 3 guys who have experience at college football that should go in there, all be vying for that job. You also bring in a few offensive linemen, D linemen, fill out some of those trench spots in the portal already. They still have time to shore up some of those additions. Couple guys following Coach over from Harding as well. Now, as far as what you lose, Quarterback Byron McNair, he was kind of a dual threat type of guy, at least marketed as such. Didn't have the most accurate sophomore campaign, did account for almost 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns through the air. And then you lose your top wide receiver, Earl Gray, 25 catches, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's out this year along with linebacker Miles Earl. That's probably the biggest loss for them. Looking at the impact last year, a freshman that came in and was an all-conference contributor right away, over 100 tackles, I believe, on the season. He will most likely be going on to bigger and better. So that's the sleeper pick. Coyotes down there at Kansas Wesleyan, excited to follow along with them. And then a final unfortunate piece of news for us tonight. Matt, you sent me this when we were prepping the show. I had no idea. I didn't even see this, but another one bites the dust, so to speak, in the Mitten State, too. Another Michigan NAIA school shutting down, man.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Siena Heights is closing their doors as an institution after 107 years as an official university. Their football program was only around since 2012, but in those 13 years, having an overall record of 65 and 59, 0.524 win percentage, pretty decent program. And it's a real shame that they're tapping out them and Concordia in recent years. It's been really a bummer. And it's kind of a trend with a lot of these small private colleges. If you can't get the funding behind it, a lot of these schools are just biting the dust one by one. It's really unfortunate. Presentation was another one a few years back in my area. They were in the North Star for the longest time and just didn't work out. So it's really unfortunate to see it. They still got one season ahead of them though. So one last hurrah for them. And it'll be interesting to see how they do. Hopefully they can piece it together in a very tough mid-states. This conference is always ridiculous. And they're going to have a bit of problems going forward because that's now 2 teams in one of your divisions that is bringing it down to 5. So they're going to have to reshuffle things a little bit going forward. But obviously, Matt Cohn, the last breaths of this program.
Yeah.
See what we can do with it.
And so you run into a very unique problem that, weirdly enough, Concordia Ann Arbor faced the same thing last year, in which they knew that their program and, in this case, their school would be shutting down permanently, but you still got a season ahead of you, right? And so you show that 2025 schedule. It's a pretty daunting schedule, too. I mean, you talked about the conference a little bit, but you're opening up against St. Francis, and you go down that list, St. Xavier, Taylor, another St. Francis, Indiana Wesleyan to close things out. How about a send-off game? That is going to be on the road in Indiana Wesleyan. That's going to be a really tough one for this squad. But for the Siena Heights team, I mean, it's got to be a very interesting, to say in the least, experience to go through something like this with the coaching staff and the players, of course, all of which, if they want to remain around the game, coaching staff, support staff, players, and otherwise, are going to have to find new opportunities. What will be interesting is now, we're in the end of June, going into right in July, I guess, when this episode goes live. I don't really necessarily know if kids can find a new opportunity at this point. I think we're too late for people who haven't already entered the portal in the process or something like that to happen. I don't believe there is a clause permitting you to enter the portal upon school closure or anything of those lines, where certain athletes will get permissions when a head coach leaves, right? I don't think they have a very similar clause for that. Birmingham Southern was another one that recently shut down, a Division III school that made some waves because they made the D3 World Series in baseball, and they were actually, their baseball team lasted longer than the actual college itself, which was such a cool storyline. Eventually they got eliminated, which was unfortunate. But like you said, there's been a lot of small schools, a lot of them fitting that smaller private build in recent history that have shut down, which is unfortunate for small school football. But unfortunately, it's just kind of like the natural progression of things. What do you think the sentiment is from coach to player in that locker room around this time?
Yeah, I mean, you really just get to give it one last go, and you get to leave your final stamp on this program. At the end of the day, you're the one closing the book here. So, how do you want to write it? In their time, in their 14 years of program history, 22 NAIA top 25 appearances, and definitely a team that we talked about every season about having a phenomenal defense. Coach Cohn is really the leader of that. Before he was the head coach in 2016, he was the one that orchestrated, those elite defenses that got so much done and got them to where they were. 2018, 2019, they went 7-3 those years, saw a lot of time in the top 25. It was a good little run for them, but now you get to end on a high note if you so choose. We talked about it with Concordia last year. Like, how do you approach that? At the end of the day, like, you still get a chance to play football. Might as well take advantage of it. So
100%.
best of luck to them and those guys going forward. It's a real shame they're closing, but at least they get to end it on their own terms in this
So
sort of
yeah,
way.
kind of.
Yeah, because not really, but in this scenario, you do get something to mold and something to build, even in that short amount of time.
Again, in their short history, an uncharacteristic down year last year. They didn't have the success in the field that they were looking for. Can something like this reinvigorate a squad that is going out there to literally give it all they got? And you talk about from the perspective of the student athlete as well. These guys are all in a prove-it year, right? You're talking about a contract year in NFL terms for all these players going out there and suiting up for Siena Heights this fall, in that they're going to put out a good film, and try and find that next opportunity, whether it is in the NAIA, in the NCAA, or otherwise. They're trying to go out there and earn their spot on their next roster for those guys that still have eligibility. So can this reinvigorate a team? Yes. Will it be enough to get them over the hump of some of these teams inside of the MSFA? Maybe, right? Who knows? This is a conference that's pretty tough top to bottom. So, yeah, very well said, my friend. I appreciate you. I think that's all we got for tonight, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Works for me.
Thank you, brother. Have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, you bet. I'll see you, man.